Good afternoon or evening, everybody. Welcome back to another weather forecast by Age Weather Forecast, and we have a lot of updates here for the North Atlantic. Hurricane Sam continues to stay at the 130-mile-an-hour Category 4 hurricane as it just spares as it goes just towards the northeast of the Leeward and as well U.S. Virgin Islands. As well, Tropical Storm Victor has formed according to Tropical Tidbits and as well according to ASCAT, so we will most likely have Tropical Storm Victor by the 5 o'clock advisory, so most likely to be seeing letter V by the end of today as a result of Tropical Depression 20 forming. As well, watching out for Victor to possibly become a weak Category 1 hurricane like I expected in the overall Eastern Atlantic and should not be a threat towards land. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So here's a look now at the 5-day tropical weather outlook here in the National Hurricane Center 2 o'clock advisory update basically. So obviously we still have Hurricane Sam as a 130-mile-an-hour Category 4 hurricane on the 28th advisory. Minimal central pressure has continued to drop now and back into the 940s. Earlier, within 24 hours ago, it was at 952 millibars. But obviously, with support, this storm has continued to organize and as well strengthen, and it is now at 949 millibars. And actually, Recon earlier today supported 945 millibars. So pressures continue to drop here, moving northwest at 9 miles an hour, and very soon with the overall trough setup and overall steering, it's going to start going towards the northeast as it goes closer and closer towards the area of Bermuda. As well, now Invest 91L has dramatically decreased in probability of formation. It was just, I believe, a 80-90 and 80% for the next 48 hours and 90% for the next 5 days. But now it has dramatically decreased in confidence to a 30%, only a 30% for 48 hours and only a 30% in 5 days. I mean, this is that's a absolutely dramatic decrease in confidence for formation, even a tropical depression formation, as a result of the overall very overall unconducive environment. And of course, tropical depression 20 has formed at 35 miles an hour and 1,007 millibars. And of course, according to tropical Tippett and ASCAT, this is already Tropical Storm Victor. Here's the overall looking at the discussion. So the National Hurricane Center does want this to become a rather strong storm, likely to be 40 within the next 12 hours. Of course, most likely to be a 40-mile-an-hour tropical storm by the 5 o'clock advisory. And it's going to continue strengthening in the overall pretty conducive environment, going from 40 to 50 to 50 to 65. So it's going to be strengthening at a pretty decent rate here. They actually have it at a 80-mile-an-hour hurricane by the next 60-ish and 72 hours, and then rapidly weakening as it gets closer into the overall early next week time period. So watching that possibly for a moderate Category 1 hurricane, as it has pretty conducive environment and overall a pretty good low circulation as of now. So with this overall gradual development in its overall structure, it's likely it's going to probably become a tropical storm by a 5 o'clock advisory. And it's looking pretty overall like a good storm right now. It's going to have conducive environmental conditions for strengthening the next 2 or 3 days. During that time period, the storm is forecasted to move over 28 to 29 degrees Celsius waters while embedded within an air mass of high mid-level moisture and very low wind shear, less than 10 knots. Not only less than 10 knots on the surface, but as well into the very high, almost at the lower stratosphere at 200 millibars. So here's the latest look now on Hurricane Sam. Of course, it actually looks a lot better than yesterday. I mean, it has a really strong amount of inflow within the system. You see the clear kind of tropical type structure with that extreme outflow and that really good upper level anticyclone. And there you see, of course, the two really good looking outflow channels basically. And then you see the inflow really going in, completely kind of separating the eye wall with its banding. It's kind of getting that really good tropical type kind of formation there. You kind of basically go from here and then kind of go out like that. You can kind of see the overall tropical type formation looking like an S there. So it's got a really good still kind of eye cover with a lot of overall cloud cover and convection. As convection is really starting to blow up, of course, then right now it's kind of still being pretty disorganized on the overall center itself. A lot of convection is starting to blow up on satellite, but it looks a lot better on IR. But I mean, look at this really great inflow there. And you see really good cumulus clouds continue to spin in a concentric type formation with a really strong upper level anticyclone with this divergent flow on those cirrus clouds. Those really kind of looking cotton candy type structure of those clouds. That is signaling basically really good structure. Really, I mean, this thing looks like an absolutely beautiful storm. Although its peak was basically around Saturday, it still looks like a or actually Sunday. Its peak was Sunday. It still looks like a really good storm, and it's already Wednesday. Again, going to continue to stay as a Category 4 storm as it's still going through a pretty conducive environment. By the next 2 days, though, it's going to start weakening and becoming Category 3 hurricane. It's going to spare, obviously, Bermuda, and it's going to go towards the northeast and go out to sea into the northwest Atlantic and slowly weaken as it's still going to be moving at a pretty slow rate, staying in pretty similar conducive environmental conditions for a while. So it's going to be a slow decrease, and it's not going to be kind of jumping with the jet stream that quickly. So it's going to be still, again, moving into the really warm water for quite an extensive time, but of course likely to still stay on our radar all the way up until really Monday or Tuesday, even Wednesday of next week. So here's now a look at Tropical Depression 20, which is the most likely already Tropical Storm Victor. And here's the overall look now at the structure. So here's a low pressure right now. I mean, this storm looks really good. You can see it clear. You can see this kind of clear rotation. I mean, this rotation looks a lot better than yesterday. It's still pretty broad. But you can kind of see the kind of clockwise vorticity in the upper levels. We're kind of obviously seeing that really good vorticity, especially at 700 millibars. I mean, we are really getting a lot better spin and a lot better overall circulation than yesterday. You can kind of see as well pretty good convection burst. Starting to actually pause it really quickly here. If I can actually pause it and go all the way to the current run, you can kind of see some rotating, really good convection bursts kind of rotating around this low pressure. So it does seem as if it is trying to slowly close itself off right now. I mean, it's getting some good convection in these upper levels right here to the north of the low pressure itself, of course, as well getting some good fully counterclockwise flows. So again, I think this is obviously a 40-mile tropical storm right now, and most likely will be Victor by the 5 o'clock advisory. So, of course, the National Hurricane Center expects it to go out to sea. It's not going to be any threat towards any land, obviously. I mean, as it starts getting some pretty rapid strength, and as well with the overall Bermuda High being a little bit further south than where it was with Sam, it's going to get picked up towards the northwest rather quickly. And as a result of its pretty rapid, or I wouldn't say rapid, but pretty I'd say fast strengthening in organization, it's going to become a Category 1, even a moderate Category 1 up to 80 miles an hour, possibly even stronger. And it's going to get really steered very quickly towards the northwest, and then kind of just go basically due north and weaken to a tropical storm as it goes into the north central Atlantic. As you're going to be seeing some drier air and as well some pretty higher pressure up there. So at this point, it's going to start really falling apart, but it's going to have a brief life or at least a brief peak. And after it becomes a hurricane for a day or so, it's going to become a tropical storm and start weakening gradually as well. So here's the overall now Tropical Storm Victor model intensity guidance, and obviously models and symbols are a lot less, I guess, aggressive than yesterday because a few were getting towards Category 2, but now only one has to get into Category 2, and actually only a few are getting it towards the Category 1 now. So as we get closer to the actual formation itself, the models will start to become more overall conservative and reliable and actually reasonable. So obviously, they still have a pretty rapid strengthening because, again, it's going to have some really good conditions for the next few days. I mean, we've got really warm water. It's a really strong AUW with extreme amount of moisture in the lower and upper levels. I mean, we're not really seeing really much to really worry about in this system condition-wise, seeing really low amounts of shear in the upper levels and lower levels, so not going to be seeing much threats with that. As well, even dry air will not be a threat. The only dry air that will actually pose a threat is towards Invest 91L, and that's why the confidence has dramatically decreased. But here's the overall intensity guidance for Tropical Storm Victor. Of course, they have it named right here. Likely to become either a high-end tropical storm or a low-end to moderately-end Category 1. And based off these conditions, I think it could very well become an 80-mile-an-hour hurricane like the National Hurricane Center says. I actually rather agree with them, but a few are, for these symbols, are a lot less intense than they were yesterday. But they have it kind of re-strengthening. You kind of see it getting up to around a 45 knot peak, then weakening to around 40 knots, and then strengthening once again. But I think it's going to go through a pretty rapid strengthening and then a rapid decreasing. I think it's going to go to its peak pretty quickly and then start decreasing in strength as it goes into a lot lesser favorable conditions. So here's now a look at Invest 91L, and it just does not look much better than yesterday. I mean, we're not seeing much development or improvement or anything really compared to yesterday that's completely different. I mean, it looks very similar. I mean, you're still seeing that scatter initiation around this, but it looks like it's just a normal short or a normal open wave trough. I mean, it does not look like anything special, and that's probably the reasoning for why the National Hurricane decreased its development percentage and probability because of its overall structure and how it's not improved and how it's just not really gotten its act together, and it most likely will not because the further west it goes, the less the condition will become favorable. So the slower it takes to actually gradually improve on its organization structure, the less a chance it actually becomes a storm. And with this rapid decrease in the actual probability, only two models are actually, or only two ensemble computer models are actually on this forecasting now. I mean, we had a ton yesterday, or not a ton, but compared to now, we had a ton, but now only two are forecasting this storm because of this rapid decrease and its overall chance of formation in general. Same thing with the model intensity guidance. I mean, there are a lot more than the two in the track, but there's still a lot less compared to yesterday. If you guys go to my video yesterday, you can kind of compare the intensity guidance and the 18Z 24 hours ago. There were a lot more ensembles and computer models actually forecasting this and actually jumping onto it because of the overall high chance of formation. But now this extremely low chance of formation, and if it drops that dramatically within 24-hour time period, it's most likely not going to form whatsoever. And we can tell by the structure. I mean, it looks absolute trash. I mean, obviously, Charles from Victor, or soon to be Charles from Victor, has obviously made much development and a gradual improvement towards its structure and strength as well, while 91L is struggling. There's a lot of reasoning for why it's struggling, and I will get to that just later into the video. But still, as few ensembles that are actually jumping on this still want 91L to form and become Wanda, but it does not seem too favorable condition-wise. I am aware that obviously 91L has higher ocean heat content, but for those who are more advanced in tropics, or, I mean, anyone really knows that water isn't the only thing that improves storms, and obviously it's obviously a pretty big factor, warm waters, but just because it has warmer ocean heat content or more SST does not mean it's going to form, because obviously, although Victor is in a lot less deeply ocean heat content environment, still forming a lot quicker than 91L, because 91L is about right here. It's in a lot warmer conditions there with ocean heat content around 75 meters, while Victor is around less than 25. But because of the obviously shear, or not shear, but because of the dry air and because of the African easterly wave kind of becoming more of a centered trough, specifically towards Victor, a lot of that moisture in the upper levels and mid levels are actually shifting towards Victor and it's low pressure rather than 91L. So 91L is losing a lot of its moisture, but we still have some pretty good ocean content within the vicinity of 91L. That could be, again, one small factor to why a few ensembles are still forecasting a tropical storm. But of course, nothing too crazy ocean heat content wise for Victor. Ocean heat content is going to be around less than 35, but we're still going to be seeing SSTs that are around above 28 degrees Celsius. So we're going to watch out for some specific Saharan level. Again, there is, or air layer, there is going to be some, as well as small amounts of Saharan air layer within the vicinity of 91L. And of course, a lot of that moisture it's kind of condensed specifically towards now the low circulation of Victor. So it's going to kind of bend that kind of SAL wave and allow it to kind of bend basically to the southwest directly into the path of 91L. And that's why 91L is going to get absolutely hammered by all of this dry air and have absolutely, basically, very little to no chance of actually formation, because obviously, not only is Victor going to be a little bit further west, or further east, is going to give it to an advantage, but as well as going to be having an upper level anticyclone, and as well going to be having a very strong moisture bubble. You can kind of see the moisture bubble there, how it kind of bends that dry air, and there is 91L getting absolutely hammered by, although the Saharan air layer is not that dense, nor is it thick, is because 91L is so open and so unorganized that even the smallest amount of dry air or SAL will absolutely demolish and as will suffocate the leftover moisture of 91L. So here's now the latest 12Z GFS model runs. So of course they want to have rather fast development for Victor 994 millibars here within the next 36 hours, then getting to as low as 980 within 54 hours, and then getting to a peak of 980, and then obviously going to go through a pretty fast peak, and then go through a pretty fast weakening phase. Of course, the GFS now basically has nothing going on whatsoever, no hope whatsoever for Invest 91L as a result of that extreme amount of dry air and little moisture left behind as a result of basically Victor kind of just consuming all that moisture for itself. CMC still has it forming, but a lot weaker, only 993 millibars, and then of course going through a pretty fast weakening phase. And of course, we're not going to be seeing much here going on here. Going to be seeing a pretty good upper level anticyclone ahead of or for Tropical Storm Victor, seeing a few basically a couple outflow channels going basically spreading out in the divergent flows to the northeast, and then one going to basically the southwest. So seeing some pretty good upper level anticyclone, considering it's going to really start strengthening quite quickly. That's going to allow for, again, a pretty big factor to why it's going to strengthen the way it is, because although there is going to be a pretty strong trough, a TUTT, it's going to actually allow for this storm to actually continue to just generate its strength here and generate as well its centered vorticity with this upper level anticyclone, and with this trough being set up the way it is to the northwest of the system. This obviously Victor will actually get steered even steer northwest even quicker than it would actually, because obviously with Larry, although kind of has a similar setup, it still kind of went like that, and that's because that trough wasn't as intense, nor was it as close as the system or to the system. So because of Victor being towards basically the southeast of this trough, it's actually going to get picked up that way and not going to go kind of south of that trough, because as a result of it kind of going slightly to the northwest, it's going to run into that trough and had no other option than to get steered like that. So that's why obviously Victor's most likely to do a very similar track to this, basically because of that trough is steering. But I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll see you guys later.